On your screen are the 10 players in NBA history who were able to accomplish 50 or more triple-doubles. And of course, some of these names are pretty obvious. LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Oscar Robertson, Russell Westbrook. If you think a little bit harder, you'll come up with names like Jason Kidd, James Harden, and Larry Bird. You might be surprised that both Wilt Chamberlain and Nikola Jokic are on this list, but then there is one name left that I think many people will be surprised by, and that is Luka Doncic. Yes, at the tender age of 23 years old, Luka has reached statistical feats that has taken some players an entire career to accomplish, and it doesn't just stop at triple-doubles. So far this season, he's averaging nearly 33 points per game, which is the 5th most points that someone of his age or younger has averaged in NBA history. At the pace in which he's going, Doncic is more than likely going to finish top 15 all time in assists. And even though Luka has only participated in 28 playoff games, he still has the same amount of 40-point outings in the postseason as Carmelo Anthony, Paul Pierce, and Dr. J combined. And yet, with all of those amazing and historic statistical feats that are the perfect display of how dominant Luka could be at such a young age, it is still an unjarring truth that regardless of how amazing the 23-year-old phenom is, the way that he plays the game of basketball has a very clear and defined ceiling to it. And the sad part about it all is that I don't believe it's going to change anytime soon. And the reason why I say this is because the biggest detriment to Luka's greatness is the greatness of Luka. See, in the NBA, there is this rather perplexing and complex problem that not too many people have been able to solve yet. I like to call it the LeBron Dilemma, where you have an individual who is so great at so many things offensively that it actually ends up hurting them because how difficult it is to construct a team around them. Most players in NBA history, even the ones that we consider all-time greats, have traceable flaws that may not prevent them from performing at high levels, but still are identifiable enough to aid the process of constructing a roster around them that complements their strengths and weaknesses. However, when it comes to Luka, at a very early age, he has quickly revealed an offensive game so well-rounded and polished that it actually makes it difficult to find teammates that would justify taking the ball out of his hands and marginalizing his impact while still yielding a result that is best beneficial for the team at large. If you need someone to attack the basket and finish at the rim, well, Luka might legitimately be the best option for that across the league. Converting roughly 73% of his shots at the basket to go along with the volume and the consistency on which Luka drives at the rim not only makes him the best guard finisher in the NBA, but that level of accuracy is on par with some lob finishing bigs. What about shot creation and tough shot making? The step back threes, the floaters, the one-legged fadeaways, and even when it comes to post play, this year Luka has been extremely aggressive on smaller guards, and the numbers back this up as well, as Luka is one of the more prolific ISO scorers in the NBA so far this season. And when you're that prolific as a scorer, driver, and shot creator, you naturally open up a lot of opportunities for playmaking, and Luka already being an elite level passer makes him unbelievable in that manner as well. So far this season, the 23-year-old is averaging nearly 9 assists a game, a mark so high that only 3 players above him have higher assist averages, and with someone who also only turns the ball over 3.5 times per game, with the volume of scoring and passing that we see from Luka on a game-to-game basis, the turnovers are actually very respectable as well. Now, this rare phenomenon of an individual being so well-rounded and diverse offensively has always existed in league history. However, in modern times, this has become much more commonplace due to the open-mindedness of a perimeter-oriented player being the focal point of an offense. Actually, it's been so commonplace that the way that we even perceive basketball has changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. Shout out to Ben Taylor over at Thinking Basketball, because he's even coined and popularized the phrase heliocentric offense. And not only have these new offensive schemes received new names to help identify what we're witnessing, but also the level of praise that these players receive who are at the epicenter of this offense is bordering cult-like, because how impressive one has to be to really pull this off. And even though, yes, it is true, it is very impressive what these players are putting up on a night-to-night basis, I personally don't look at it that way. Because instead of seeing these players being the figurative sun that's in the middle of this heliocentric offense, what I see is young star players being stuck in the middle of a demonic cycle that is never ending. Welcome to NBA Hell. Now, the first stage of NBA Hell is the great player putting up great stats. We already talked about that in the beginning of the video and how Luka clearly fits the bill. And even though, yes, it is true, the reason why these players are able to put up great numbers is because how great of an individual talent they are. Another huge contributing factor to these outcomes are the teammates that surround them, which is the second stage of NBA Hell. Once more, it's very difficult to find someone who is talented enough to justify taking the ball out of the hands of someone like Luka. So in the meantime, what happens is that the franchise just surrounds the star caliber player with a bunch of ancillary pieces who are more or less one-dimensional and very analytic driven. And the reason why they do this is just to maximize the production that are coming from these players, and the Dallas Mavericks are very clearly another great example of this, as Luka is the engine to that offense. 44% of the shots from Dallas are three-pointers, second highest frequency in the NBA. 13% of the shots from Dallas are corner threes, which is the most frequent corner three-point shooting team in the league. And the Mavericks are also dead last in mid-range frequency. And even though, yes, in theory and in practice, this does produce offensive production that can reach all-time highs, and even though, yes, it is very easy to mold the narrative around the concept of the individual star making his teammates better because how efficient and productive his teammates become since he is on the floor, and all that sounds great, but in my mind, there's another approach you should take to this, and it's the fact that because of this style of offense, it actually makes his teammates worse, because how dependent they are on one individual player to create everything for them. And again, that is being seen with the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic. Over the past 4 seasons, there is a noticeable drop-off in accuracy on 2s and 3s when Luka is off the court in comparison to when he is playing, and even when it comes to the amount of 3-pointers that certain players are able to produce, again, a noticeable drop-off when Luka is off the floor. But easily the best way to capture this is just looking at the on-off numbers over the past 4 seasons. And of course, to Luka and the Mavericks, there will be a drop-off scene when you take the best player off the floor and replace him with a bench player, but the level of drop-off that we're seeing with the Mavericks when Luka goes on the bench is pretty staggering, especially this season, as it has been abundantly clear that the Mavericks are desperately missing Jalen Brunson. So on the surface, all of this sounds ideal. You have an individual who's extremely talented, who can handle an offense and impact it in various different ways and do it at a very high level. You surround that individual with supporting cast members whose shot selections are very analytic driven, and the reason for this is because you're trying to best maximize what lesser players can produce on the floor, and the result of all of this tends to be extremely efficient and productive offensive teams. But the true nuance behind this is that those supporting cast members, even though they're not that good to begin with, they turn out to be much worse because they're just overly dependent on one player generating and creating everything for them, so they never actually develop any other aspects of their games. And because of that very fine and important detail, it leads us to the next stage of NBA hell, and that is no championships. Throughout NBA history, there have been other players who have participated in this type of a scheme beyond Luka, some of which I would even argue are better than him, such as LeBron and pre-Phil Jackson Michael Jordan. Both players were fantastic, had all-time moments, and put up historic numbers. However, it never translated to a championship. The biggest reason why those were the results, outside of the fact that having one individual have that much influence on an entire team's offense can become taxing, but also, and more importantly, when your offense is structured in that manner, it becomes predictable at times. And because of that, it makes it just easier for opposing defenses, especially the elite ones in the playoffs, to structure defensive schemes to impede the production that has made those teams perform at all-time highs. Also, this concept has been openly talked about with certain NBA players, like the late great Kobe Bryant criticizing James Harden's style of play back when he was in Houston.
I'm not a fan of in terms of winning championships. I don't think that style is ever going to win championships. If you take one player, you put him at the top of the key, or you put him on the wing and you're running screen rolls, you're always in front of the defense. The defense can key on that, particularly in the playoffs. And that's easy to defend.
And then you have Shawn Marion and Raja Bell talk about the predictability in the offense that they participated in that led to them never winning a championship.
What stopped us from ultimately getting over that hump in Matrix's estimation, in hindsight?
I think adjustments, man. I think, like that's the difference. You know what I'm saying? When you got one guy who gets the ball and he gets to dictate what's going on, who gets it and all that stuff, no wonder everybody said we was predictable. San Antonio was the first thing that come up their mouth. When you go back and look at the stuff, a lot of the coaches and everybody be like, oh, we knew we were going to beat y'all in the playoff series. Y'all predictable.
So if teams are able to predict and stop players such as James Harden and Steve Nash on teams that are much more talented than this Dallas Mavericks unit, then there's just no way that anyone can convince me that Luka is going to win a championship anytime soon. And as we all know, when you have a player as great as Luka Doncic who isn't able to win championships, what quickly follows behind that is criticism, which is our final stage. Look, we already know how this goes. Luka is an all-time great talent who has the ability to put up all-time great stats, but which means that the expectations that are placed upon him will be the same ones that other all-time great players received, which is winning a championship. So when he fails to do so, especially if he cannot consistently make deep postseason runs, the level of criticism that will rain on him will be the same that other all-time great players received when they didn't win championships. And the sad part about it all is that I don't believe that he deserves it. I do believe that it is unfair, but I know for a fact that it is coming. But here's where things get worse, and this is why I say when you're stuck in NBA hell, you are in an endless cycle. When Luka starts to receive that harsh and relentless criticism that will come to him, the only way that people are going to be able to defend him and justify putting his name in conversations with other all-time greats is by using those exact same great numbers that started off this endless cycle to begin with. And I know this to be the case because the NBA media did this to LeBron for basically 2 decades. LeBron would go out there and put up all-time great numbers while sharing a roster with bad teammates that never resulted in a championship, and because of that, it would lead to criticism, but then his defenders would then use the numbers that he posted up to prove that he really is that great of a player. So I already know what's going to happen to Luka, and again, I believe it's unfair. And it's not because I don't understand nor follow the logic, because I do. It's just because I believe the way that we assess all-time great players shouldn't be heavily dependent on what they do statistically. Going back to great players in the heliocentric offense like LeBron and MJ, both of them put up great numbers, but made sacrifices and adjustments to their games when it was time to win championships because of the systems that they had to adapt to. So I hope the same thing happens to Luka sooner than later. Even though it is great to see historic, and I will be buying a ticket to watch Luka live because I have to witness what is happening right now. However, I don't need to see 2 or 3 seasons of Luka averaging 30 points and 8 or 9 assists for me to know that he is an all-time great offensive player. It's already understood. What would be more valuable to me is if the young phenom is able to flourish in an infrastructure that takes the ball out of his hands, that lends itself to a level of success that results in multiple championships. But until then, Luka, my boy, you are in NBA hell. Every single night, people are going to expect you to put up all-time great numbers just for your team to barely compete. And then when it doesn't work out and you don't win a championship, those same people will then criticize you for not winning a championship, even though they know, like I know, like you know, like everybody else knows, the system that is set in place for you to put those numbers up will never lead to a championship. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Also, hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be updated on when I upload videos on these channels. Also, make sure you check out my second channel as well. Link will be in the description. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.